The hero's dream curdled into ash in his mouth. Blood stained the pavement, a reflection of the crimson blossoming in Deku's heart. The world that had mocked him for being quirkless now mocked him for his failure. In the smoldering wreckage of his idol and his own aspirations, a new, chilling truth ignited. Sometimes, the greatest villains are forged from the ashes of the greatest heroes.
Izuku was, in a word, tired. There was no fight for him to rush off and analyze. There was no one around to pick on him for being quirkless. He was just tired. He blinked hard, not used to feeling the empty exhaustion that came with the uneventful silence. He didn't like it. He liked being happy, excited, motivated for a goal. He got up from his chair, making his mind. He was all tuckered out of hero work for today, but that didn't mean he couldn't find something to feel good about. It had been a while since he treated his mom to something special. He couldn't think of an occasion for the day, but that didn't really matter. He left his room and wandered through the home, still trying to think of what they might do together, and he found her in the front room. She was sitting on the couch with her head in her hands, her worried expression breaking his heart. She was worrying about him again, as usual. "Hey, Mom," he called out. She looked up, quickly plastering a smile over her face. "You don't have to be so worried about me, you know. I can take care of myself." She sighed. "I know, honey, but every day you come home with more bruises and burns, and I'm not doing enough, and I don't know how I'm supposed to help you and I." "Mom," he interrupted. "It's okay. Sometimes my classmates just need some sort of scapegoat, and I know I can take it. If it wasn't me it would be someone else, and besides, it's good hero training," he said cheerfully. Inko promptly began sobbing. "My baby boy, you are just so beautiful, but I worry about you," she cried. Izuku shifted uncomfortably. "Anyways, I wanted to ask if you wanted to do something together, like we used to," he suggested. "Maybe go to the mall." She hesitated. "Well, you're going to go to high school next year, and I've been saving up," she said. "Uniforms, activity fees. If you get into UA, I'm sure there will be an admittance fee. I'll go with you, of course, but I don't know if you'd want to if we can't actually get anything." "I'll take care of it," he said with a bright smile. "Koch-chan gave me some money yesterday." "He gives you money?" Inko asked incredulously. "I thought he just picked on you every day." "Yeah," Izuku laughed awkwardly, scratching behind his head. "I'm not actually sure what he thinks about me, but he does like to vent on me. He felt like he owed me something, though, and he hates having debts. Anyway, dinner can be on me tonight." Inko smiled at her son. Her eyes started watering, and Izuku started to wonder what shirt he should change into, after this one got soaked. The happy energy at the mall helped Izuku put off his feeling of empty boredom, and so did his night with his mom. He told her all about how well the police and heroes work together, how many villains he'd seen get captured, and how his school was going otherwise. She talked about her days at work, and they laughed over her minor frustrations with coworkers. He felt more connected to her than he had in a long time. He knew she always loved him, but their relationship often revolved around his desire to be a hero despite being quirkless, while she worried about where she should draw the line between protecting and supporting him. Having more normal conversations, just about their lives, was fun and refreshing. For some unknown reason, Izuku felt his eyes keep getting drawn to an inconspicuous man sitting nearby. There was nothing specific about him, he just felt off. Something wasn't quite right, and somehow Izuku knew he wasn't mentally stable. "What's wrong?" his mother asked him when she caught yet another of his concerned glances. Izuku shook his head. He couldn't just say nothing, the feeling was stronger now. "I don't know," he admitted. "That man over there worries me, for some reason." Inko pursed her lips. "You don't know anything about him, sweetie, why would?" "I don't know, Mom," he said. He didn't mean to snap, but he was getting more and more on edge. "There's something going on, I can feel it." "Honey, why?" She was cut off again, but this time it wasn't by Izuku. A group of girls he didn't know were walking by, chatting with each other, and one of them was particularly eye-catching. On top of being the most animated and bubbly out of them, moving her arms as she talked like she was putting on a show, she was also pink. Completely pink, from head to toe, with two small horns poking out of her equally pink hair. When they passed by the man's table, Izuku was immediately proven right. The girls all screamed as the man shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. His hand shot out, impossibly fast, and latched onto the animated pink girl's arm. The mall had fallen completely silent. Was it something about the man's quirk? Despite the screaming and the commotion, Izuku was sure it wasn't natural for that many people to notice and stop talking. Into the eerie silence, the man's voice echoed softly, "You want to be a hero, don't you?" The girl was trying to pull away. "Don't you?" he repeated. She just nodded hesitantly. Then he asked, "Why?" "I want to save people who need saving," she managed, her voice impressively even. "I want to give a helping hand to the people that need it." There was a moment of tension where nothing happened. Then, slowly, a grin began to spread across his face. It was unhinged, eyes too wide, too much excitement for so little emotion. "You want to save people, right?" he said. He continued without waiting for her to respond. You want to save them, just like a hero is going to save you, right? He started laughing. Right. Faster than anyone could process, he thrown the girl to the floor and pulled something from inside his suit. It was black and metallic, and Izuku didn't need to see it properly to know what it was. By the time he processed what was about to happen, he realized two people had already reacted. One was himself. The other, even faster, was his mom. Midoriya's quirk could attract small objects toward her, and she'd always considered it to be quite weak. However, as the strongest heroes know, any quirk is only as powerful as the effort you put into it. In this moment, without hesitation, she found she was much stronger than she had thought as she latched onto the small girl and pulled. Just as the man took aim and pulled his trigger, the pink girl flew into the air in Inko's direction. Without any time to think, Izuku changed his direction and caught her, gently setting her down before dashing again towards the thug. He hadn't yet reacted to what had happened, staring at the cracked floor where his bullet had hit. He looked up just as Izuku got there, and his expression changed back to a grin. Well. It looks like you got saved after all, he said, easily kicking Izuku away. But you'll notice, that wasn't a hero, right? In fact, as I remember, I think it was illegal. Right. Am I right? Isn't it illegal to try attacking me, doing hero work without a license? I'm pretty sure people get arrested for that, right? Izuku continued to dive at him, undeterred by the beating he was getting. It was nothing compared to trying to fight with Koch-chan, after all. He knew he couldn't beat the thug. The man obviously had some fighting experience, but if he could just get the gun, it wouldn't be so dangerous for everyone around. What are you all doing? The man asked as he laughed maniacally, addressing the audience that continued to stare. Let me guess, you're waiting for a hero, right? I'll bet a bunch of you are just filming, right? This child has more courage than all of you, and so does his mother. At least, I'll guess it's your mom. Not too many people have that kind of green hair, right? The false, insane mirth disappeared as the thug's eyes darkened. Why are you playing hero, kid? Where are the real heroes, the ones that do this as a job? He caught Izuku's arm, much like he'd caught the girls from before. Does it matter? Look around. He raised his voice as he addressed the terrified onlookers once again. You all think that you need a hero, right? If only a hero was here to stop me. Well, you don't. None of you need a hero. This society doesn't need a hero. You don't need them. What you need is a backbone and a shred of compassion. He looked at Izuku, then down at his gun. He hesitated. I can't really tell myself I'm trying to better the world with this display if I kill the only good person here, can I? He mused. Should I kill the one-up? He looked back over at the pink girl, who was still frozen in fear where Izuku had left her, a conflicted expression on her face. Your mom wouldn't be able to save her again, he chuckled after a glance at Inko. She was barely conscious, trying to stand up to help her son, but her power usage just now had been far beyond her limits. With his mind made up, the man suddenly dashed with inhuman speed, catching the poor girl again before she could try to run away. You didn't run away before because you felt bad, right? The guy said. You just said you wanted to help people, so you couldn't just leave, right? Well, it's too late now. He aimed his gun at her again. For Izuku, the next moment happened in slow motion. Everything seemed to slow down, most of all himself. He could see it happening, but he couldn't make himself react in time. Inko was still conscious. Like her son, she tended to throw herself between her loved ones and danger, then worry about what might happen to her later. She couldn't attract the girl again. But she'd always been able to attract small objects. Izuku watched as his mother's eyes glowed green as she activated a quirk. He watched her latch onto the gun in the thug's hand, attempting to yank it out of his hand. The gun was pulled toward her. She wasn't strong enough to pull it out of the man's grasp. He was already pulling the trigger. By the time the shot rang out, the gun was pointed at Inko. The scene was burned into Izuku's memory like a hot iron, never dulling, never fading. His mother's last moments, as a hero. He tried to scream. A strangled whimper escaped his lips. He felt something deep down, a tightness in his mind that grew and grew until snap. Something broke. Shattered, snapped, freed. He didn't know what word to use. The important thing is that something changed. He reeled, grief combined with a sudden overload of information completely overwhelming his mind. He heard the man curse, and Izuku instantly came back to reality. He was holding his mom in his arms, but she was already gone. The bullet had gone straight through her chest. The man growled and looked back down at the pink girl, who was obviously in shock. This is your fault, he told her. But people die for those who don't deserve it. The girl started trembling, her face draining of color. Izuku didn't realize he'd started moving until he was right behind the man. In a voice laden with fury and yet terrifyingly emotionless, he heard himself say, I seem to remember someone else behind the trigger. The man jumped in shock, dropping the girl as he whirled to face him. Izuku could see what he was going to do long before he did it. It was almost laughably easy, if you were broken enough to laugh in such a situation. You try to kill a child and blame the heroes. You kill my mother and blame the person she died to protect. Can you get any lower? Izuku quite easily managed to knock the gun out of the man's hand this time around, catching his wrist and digging his fingers into the tendons in just the right place to make his hand reflexively release from the pain. The man tried to kick him. It was the same move as last time, and Izuku lazily stepped to the side as his foot sailed past him. "I'd love to draw this out and beat you senseless," Izuku admitted, "but right now there's someone that needs my help." The man's entire body tensed, and Izuku remembered the burst of speed he used moments ago to catch the pink girl that was now sobbing on the floor. It was most likely a very basic burst-type speed quirk, letting him move incredibly fast for short intervals. Low-level quirks like his didn't have functions that increased his reaction speed after he sped up. Izuku twisted to the side and held his arm out, just as the man blurred forward in a burst of speed. Izuku knew his guess was right when the man promptly clotheslined himself on Izuku's outstretched arm. Izuku watched dispassionately as the thug collapsed, clutching at his throat. He'd rushed in quite fast. It was possible he'd crushed his windpipe. Somewhere in his mind, he was disturbed at the disappointment he felt when he confirmed that was not the case. He scanned the man's pressure points and weak spots like they were lighting up, and without hesitation, he delivered a strike to the side of his neck. He was out cold. Izuku left him where he fell and immediately ran over to the girl, dropping to his knees next to where she sat on the floor, shell-shocked. "It's okay," he said, and even though it wasn't, he had to try to help her pain before letting himself feel his own. "What's your name?" "Mina," she said, just above a whisper. She stared sightlessly ahead. "Mina Ashido." Izuku nodded. "My name is Izuku Midoriya, and my mom's name is Inko." He hesitated. "Will you?" He choked on his words, and she looked up at him. "Will you come to the funeral, Mina?" he asked, his voice cracking. "She would like it if you were there." "She's really gone, then?" she whispered. "For good. For me." Mina's black and yellow eyes began to well up with tears, and Izuku tentatively pulled her into a hug. "I think you have a really bright future as a hero," Izuku offered. "My mom did too. Be a great one for us, okay?" She wrapped her arms around him too, burying her head into his shirt. Unable to answer, she just nodded. Izuku started to rub comforting circles on her back. Izuku figured it wasn't normal for him to be able to talk about his mom so soon without bawling, but he wasn't feeling much of anything yet. He was in shock, and he was content to stay that way until he'd finished comforting Mina. As he held her, the police finally arrived on the scene, rushing in and putting handcuffs on the man before dragging him off. Another officer approached Mina and Izuku. "Are you two alright?" the man asked. "We'll survive," Izuku responded for both of them. They didn't let go of each other. The officer sighed. "That's good. I'm afraid we need to talk to Miss Ashido for a moment." She shuddered, then pulled away and got to her feet. "What do you need?" she asked, her voice a bit hoarse. "Just follow me," the officer responded. He led her into a more private area with another officer to ask her some questions. Meanwhile, Izuku was left to watch as more policemen cleared the area and loaded his mom's body into a van. By now, the numbness was starting to wear off, and he was desperately trying to keep himself together. After a while, Mina was brought back out and Izuku took her place. He shared a small wave with her, but otherwise didn't get to interact before he was sitting down in front of the police. "Let's keep this short and simple," the man said. Izuku nodded. "First, just tell me what happened." Izuku swallowed hard, squeezing his eyes shut before starting the story. "My mom and I were having a night out with some extra money I had. It had been a while. While we were eating, the man you arrested suddenly stood up and grabbed Mina by the arm. I don't know how he knew, but he asked her if she wanted to be a hero, and she said yes. He asked her why, so she told him she wanted to save people." Izuku took a deep breath. I don't know what point he was trying to make, but that was what he was waiting for. He threw her on the ground and pulled out a gun, so my mom and I both reacted before we really had a chance to think. My mom used her attraction cord to pull Mina out of the way, and I caught her before going to distract the man. I was trying to get his gun, but he was way too fast for me. He spouted out some sort of monologue about how heroes are bad for society, and then he threw me to the side and went for Mina again. He paused. This would be the hard part. He pushed on. My mom was out of it because pulling Mina was way beyond her limit for her quirk, so she couldn't help much. Still, she tried to pull the gun out of his hand, but it wasn't strong enough. She ended up attracting the gun towards her right as he shot. There might be something that happened right after that which I missed, but then I heard the man telling Mina that it was her fault my mom was dead. I got really angry, and when I attacked him this time I managed to get the upper hand and knock him out. There was a moment of silence. "Is that all?" the officer said. Izuku nodded. The officer looked very uncomfortable. Eventually, he sighed. Izuku knew what was coming next, and he hated that the stupid thug was right. When the officer was unable to keep talking, Izuku took a guess. "I'm being arrested, aren't I?" he said dully. "For unlicensed hero work and assault of a citizen." The officer just nodded. "If you were acting in self-defense that would be different, but you were never attacked," he tried to explain. "I'm sure the judge will be very understanding, but the law states you still have to go to court." "I know," he sighed. But try to make sure Mina doesn't see. I'm worried she might try to stop you, and that's a crime too. The officer nodded. He cuffed Izuku's hands behind his back as protocol demanded and led him into a police vehicle, shielding him from view with several more officers. One of the policemen went to Mina and explained that they needed him to speak with someone at the courthouse, and Izuku was taken to the juvenile detention center. Alone in his cell, he finally started to break down. He felt like he was being crushed, drowning in sorrow and grief, but he also felt something he didn't expect. Anger. Rage. A bitter fury, at the man who killed his mother, but also at the law. How could they possibly think this was helpful? With the rise of superheroes, it was obvious that vigilantes needed to be kept in check, but the best solution couldn't be to ban people from helping each other. He clenched his fists. He wasn't angry at the heroes, not quite. But the existence of the profession had ruined the concept of real heroism, helping people when they needed help no matter the consequences. And that did make him angry. It made him angrier that the man who killed his mother had been so successful in making his point. The days in the detention center flew by in a blur of tears and anger. He couldn't go home, not only because he'd been arrested for a violent crime, but also because there was no adult or guardian to take care of him. As far as he knew, the only people that might want to see him were Mina and a slim chance of Bakugo, but neither of them knew he'd been arrested, so he got no visitors. He wondered if Mina would be at the hearing. She was very directly involved, but the police had already gotten her testimony. It would probably be better if she never knew. An aspiring hero had no business feeling bitter towards the law. Because of his situation, his case was given priority, and the trial was only 4 days after the event. He'd already been there for 3, so that meant it was tomorrow. He finally got a visitor, but it wasn't someone that wanted to check on him. It was a policeman that had been on the scene and arrested him. His name was Officer Rin. Izuku was relieved to find that he held a grudge against the man. His problem was with the system, not the individuals. I tried to change it, but I couldn't, Rin said, looking beyond frustrated. The judge they gave you has a reputation for being unforgiving to unlicensed heroism, though he's never convicted a child. Your age is your best shot, but I can't believe they assigned him to this case. He usually doesn't do juvenile cases at all. He was nearly tearing his hair out. That's okay, Izuku said. Having something like this on my record isn't as bad for my job prospects as being quirkless. The man sighed, hanging his head. Even Kurata is getting a more forgiving judge, he growled. Izuku vaguely remembered being told that was the name of the man who'd attacked Mina and killed his mom. His trial is in another week. Izuku couldn't really bring himself to care, though he did appreciate how much the officer cared about what happened to him. All he'd ever wanted to do was be a hero, and that dream had been shattered. He didn't want it anymore, and he wouldn't be able to reach it if he tried. Most hero schools strictly rejected anyone who had already been arrested, especially if it was a violent crime. Something like assaulting a civilian, for example. Officer Rin left, and Izuku went back into his room, his cell, which he'd hardly left but to eat. Some of the kids in there were obviously the type to try to pick on him. Many of them were there for going overboard doing exactly that. The dead look in his eyes scared them away before they tried. At least tomorrow the ordeal would be over. As soon as Izuku walked into the room, he knew how it was going to go. The judge's glare told him he had some sort of vendetta against vigilantes, and anyone else that thought they were a hero without getting there legally. He wondered absently what had happened to the man to make him feel that way. He heard his name, and he tuned in to what was being said. Izuku Midoriya, is it true that you attacked Kiichi Kurata unprovoked? What is the current legal definition of provocation? He asked. The judgment in the man's eyes faded just a bit at his professionalism. Was it in self-defense? He asked. No. It was in the defense of someone else. I was never attacked, he said simply. The judge nodded. You are found guilty of assaulting a citizen. Did the victim ever ask you for your help? Izuku shook his head. No, Your Honor. You are found guilty of uninvited vigilantism. Court adjourned. Wait. Officer Rin spoke up, frustration bleeding into his tone. Please, just hear out his story. The situation. Everyone has a story, officer. I'm not interested. Court adjourned. With that, he left the room. Officer Rin slumped, giving Izuku a pained look. I'm sorry, he said. I tried talking to him before the trial, too. The quick trial was supposed to be a kind gesture, but it also made it so I couldn't find a lawyer for you. It's okay, Izuku said without looking at him. I'll be fine. The officer sighed heavily. I should have just let you go. Izuku shook his head. Someone else would have interrogated the witnesses, and you would have been fired. There was a murder, after all. They won't let any of this go easily. Besides, I'm still a minor. I'll get it sealed when I become an adult. Rin just looked more upset about how easily Izuku was taking it. You shouldn't have to. It's fine, officer, Izuku said. Thank you, but there's nothing anyone can do now. I'll just have to deal with it. According to his sentence, he would be living at the detention center and going to school on probation until he was an adult. He didn't particularly care for schoolwork or grades anymore, but he needed something else to focus on anyway. He was allowed to get some of his things from his house, and he was moved into a better room than the temporary cell before. There were only a few more days of middle school left, so he hoped he could at least get good grades on all of his finals. As he stared up at the building, the sense of normalcy hit him like a punch to the gut. Everyone around him was acting like it was just another school day. The school, the grounds, everything looked like just another school day. But it wasn't, not for him. As he started moving again, he heard a very familiar voice call out to him. "Deku," Koch-chan said, jogging over to him. That in itself was strange, but so was his tone of voice. There was no anger, no condescension, just worry. "Where have you been?" he said. I saw what happened on the news. I'm sorry." He felt a surge of relief. If he were still the old Izuku, he probably would have started crying. At least not everyone was going to treat this like everything was still normal. "I've been staying with the police. You could say they've taken me in, since I don't have anyone at home to take care of me anymore." Bakugo nodded, and the two of them started walking to class. "My mom has been saying she wants to take you in," he admitted. "I think it would be pretty weird, but it's probably better than staying at the police station, right?" Izuku stayed silent for a moment. "Thank you," he said eventually. "I would like that, but I don't think she'll be able to get the police to let her." "Maybe," Bakugo said doubtfully. "I'd like to see them try to say no to her, though." Izuku smiled faintly when he thought of Mitsuki Bakugo, with an extra dose of her son's ferocity, interrogating the officers on why he couldn't be taken in. In all honesty, it would probably be a disaster. He couldn't deny he felt a surge of satisfaction when he imagined his incarceration being all over the news, but he didn't want the entire public to be bitter towards the law and policemen. Even if the law needed to somehow be changed, the cops didn't deserve the hate they would probably get. When they arrived to class, Izuku was immediately informed that Koch-chan's change in attitude didn't extend to the rest of his classmates. "Hey, Quirkless," someone jeered. "Still want to be a hero? I heard your last attempt didn't go too." An explosion went off in the kid's face. "Have some respect for the dead," Bakugo growled at him. "And don't pretend you would have somehow saved the day with your long-ass neck." The kid balked, not at all expecting Deku to be defended by his primary tormentor. No one else said anything. Everyone knew you didn't mess with Bakugo. Izuku wondered about the worried glances Bakugo kept sending him when he thought he wasn't looking. Did he really care that much? Maybe he wanted the rivalry back. Izuku was the only one that ever set his goals as high as Koch-chan did. Was the constant harassment just his way of getting competitive? Well, if his goal was to get Izuku back on the hero track, he was going to be disappointed. Izuku had been rather disenchanted with the prospect of upholding the law. He stared out the window. Was there anything he wanted to do anymore? He could always try to become a real vigilante. He still wanted to save people, and spite was a good motivator. Hero school revolved largely around quirks anyway. Half of his education would be wasted if he went to UA with no quirk to train. He sighed. That train of thought wasn't good for his future. He should really just go for a real job that could help people. Maybe he could get into the support class, even if he wasn't going to do the actual saving. He knew his quirk analysis could be invaluable to certain heroes. He nodded to himself. That could be a reasonable goal. He could work towards that, and it would be fulfilling. If he managed to gain some influence, he could change the way things worked, too. So where was his motivation? Katsuki Bakugo's mind was racing. Kindness and comfort wasn't something he was good at, and he didn't know if he was doing it right. But the spark in Deku's eyes that had always challenged him, driving him forward even as it insulted him with the idea that a quirkless person could be better than him, was completely gone. He hated it, and was angry at Deku for letting it go out, but that wasn't the important part. The important thing was bringing it back. Maybe it was a little bit for Deku. Bakugo knew the world was a better place with his enthusiasm and passion, but it was also for himself. His goal was to surpass All Might, and to do that he needed to take steps. Deku was always the immediate motivation right in front of his face that drove him to prove himself. Everyone around him already knew he was the best, and they basically worshipped him for it. They never even pretended they could surpass or even catch up to him. Deku, on the other hand, was firm in his belief that if he just worked harder, he could do it too. Deku was the only one that made him feel like he needed to prove himself, and even though it irritated him to the ends of the earth, he knew he needed it. If he just looked at All Might, at where he needed to go, the distance between was too overwhelming. If he stayed focused on the immediate challenge, though, proving to his infuriating classmate and occasionally, he admitted, his friend that he was and would always be the best, then he would keep improving at every opportunity. The asshole that had killed Deku's mom hadn't just extinguished the light of Inko Midoriya's life, he'd also doused the fire in her son, and consequently taken something from Bakugo. It made him furious. Perhaps the worst aspect was that he didn't know if he could fix it. When he looked at Deku, he could see that something had been thoroughly broken, and he didn't know if he could fix it. He was supposed to be able to do anything, he had known he could do anything he set his mind to. But he wasn't sure, and it hurt his pride. And finally, he was confused. He knew the death of his mother would hurt, probably more than Bakugo could imagine. But the Deku he knew wouldn't break, he would get stronger. The Deku he knew would realize that happened to other people, too, and he would become even more determined to become a hero that could prevent that. What else had happened? After school ended, he caught Izuku making a beeline for the exit. His eyes narrowed. He sped up, catching him before he could leave. He needed some answers, some more information to work with if he was going to do anything about the situation. Deku, I need to ask you some questions, he said bluntly. The other boy stiffened, slowly turning towards him. He sighed. Okay, but I don't have a ton of time, he said. The police are expecting me back soon. That honestly caught him by surprise, as well as the fact that Deku didn't think he would be allowed to leave. What was the deal with that? Outwardly, though, he just nodded. He cut himself off. Izuku, what happened to your dream? He asked bluntly. I know you're in pain because of what happened, and I also know I'm not the one that will be able to help you with that. It's not what I'm good at. But there's something else. I know how you are, and this should have made you even more driven to become a hero and save people, but it seems like you've given up. Why? Deku hesitated for a moment. I still want to save people, he finally said. When people need me, I want to be there. I just don't know how to get there anymore. Bakugo blinked, even more confused. If you haven't given up, then where's your fire? Where's the passion? Where's the determination that never stops challenging me, even when I'm beating the crap out of you? What happened? Deku chuckled. I don't know, he admitted softly. I hope it comes back someday. Maybe, I just need some time. I need to come to terms with what happened and move on. Bakugo was already shaking his head. I was never very nice to you, but I know you. You'll never move on and you never should. Something else happened, something that's in your way of stopping this kind of thing from happening to anyone you can reach. The boy stared at him for a second. Finally, he shook his head and sighed. Nothing gets past you, huh? I don't want to talk about it yet. I didn't lose my passion, I just need some time to figure out where to direct it. No one helped us when we needed it, even though we were surrounded by people. I want to somehow teach people that they can do more than just wait for a hero. If just a couple more people had stepped in, no one would have died. Bakugo winced inwardly. So that's what was broken. His blind, idealistic faith was gone, and now he didn't know what to do. Still, this was something he was sure Deku could figure out. It wasn't anything he needed to fix, but he would try to help where he could. He put a hand on Deku's shoulder. You'll figure it out, he said confidently. When that fire comes back, tell me. Deku nodded, just a bit of the spark showing in his eyes, and Bakugo let him go this time. The thing he hated most about Deku was also the thing he admired most, though he'd never admit it even to himself. The kid never gave up. Bakugo didn't know what had knocked him down so hard, but he would get up again. That spark he'd caught a glimpse of before confirmed that. Who knows, maybe he'd even been some help. Still, there was something he was missing. If he wanted the real answers he was looking for, the one thing that Deku had refused to tell him, he'd have to find them himself. The only place he could think of to start was the incident at the mall. I'm sorry, but who are you? The pink girl asked. Bakugo huffed. My name is Bakugo, and I'm Izuku's friend. I came to ask about what really happened that day at the mall, Bakugo said impatiently. You're Mina Ashido, right? She nodded hesitantly. Yeah, I am, she said. Her voice was soft and a bit fragile. Bakugo cursed to himself. He'd have to tread lightly around her as well, which was something he was really not good at. What don't you know? She asked. It was all over the news. I know, I saw it, he replied with a scowl. But I've known him for a long time, and he's not acting like himself. Something else happened that wasn't broadcasted. Mina went silent for a moment before stepping back, gesturing for Bakugo to come in. How did you find where I lived? She asked. I asked around. There aren't very many pink girls with horns in town, he said shortly. She accepted the explanation, although she still looked uncomfortable. She let him into her house, stopping by her father's study to let him know they had a visitor. Dad, one of Izuku's friends is here, you know, the boy that saved me at the mall. He had some questions, so we're just going to talk for a little bit. He looked up from his work, curious. Alright, let me know if you need anything, he said, shrugging and turning back to what he was working on. With that, she led him to the sitting room. She sat down, gesturing for Bakugo to do the same. He obliged, sitting on their couch across from her. What do you need to know? She asked. Bakugo hesitated. I don't know, he admitted. There's too much I don't know. Just tell me about what happened. I mean, if you can. I don't want to push too hard. Damn it, this was hard. He couldn't wait until all of this was over. Being sensitive was shitty business. Mina just nodded. Well, I was at the mall with some of my friends when this crazy guy just suddenly stood up and grabbed my arm. He somehow knew that I wanted to be a hero, and when I told him I wanted to save people, he tried to shoot me. He kept talking too, he was giving some sort of speech the whole time. It's like he thought it was some kind of show. He was trying to make a point that we can't always rely on heroes to save us. But when he tried shooting me to prove his point, Izuku and his mom saved me. His mom used her core to pull me away before he shot, and Izuku caught me. Bakugo took it all in, lips pursed. That couldn't be the entire reason, right? When he talked to Deku, he'd said something along those lines, but Deku couldn't be stupid enough to take everything a villain said to heart, right? Mina kept going. After that, Izuku kept trying to somehow disarm the guy. He was going for the gun, but the man was just toying with him while he gave another speech. This time, though, he kept yelling at everyone watching, saying that they should be helping like Izuku was. He said something stupid about how Izuku was somehow the one breaking the law, and then he threw Izuku away and went for me again. Bakugo barely refrained from interrupting. What did he mean, Deku was breaking the law? He was the one trying to kill an innocent girl. The man tried to shoot me again, but Izuku's mom managed to save me again. Mina took a breath, squeezing her eyes shut. She used up too much of her strength saving me the first time. Since she couldn't pull me again, she tried to pull the gun out of the man's hands. His grip was too strong, so instead, another deep breath instead, she just pulled it towards her just as he fired. Bakugo cursed under his breath. I see, he said softly. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Recounting the memory was obviously very painful, and Bakugo could see that she blamed herself. He wondered why she agreed to tell him about it. The man started yelling at me and saying it was my fault he killed her, and that's when Izuku attacked him. He somehow grabbed his wrist and twisted it so he dropped the gun, and when the man tried to dash at him with his quirk, Izuku made him clothesline himself on his arm. Then he knocked him out, and that's all. The cops eventually got there and asked me about it, then they asked Izuku after they were done with me. I wanted to talk to him after, but apparently they needed him for some more things about his mom, so I didn't get the chance. They just took him with them. Bakugo asked with a frown. Mina nodded, and his frown deepened. That couldn't be normal. Well, thank you. I still don't know what to do, but thank you. Mina nodded again, and he left. He had a better understanding now, but he still wasn't quite sure what was going on. He scowled. All this work for that damn nerd had better be worth it. Somehow, everything had gotten even worse for Izuku. He felt a little better after talking with Koch-chan, but that was ruined as soon as he got back to the detention center. Kurata has escaped. As if his faith in law enforcement needed another blow. He was broken out by an unidentified group of villains. We are not sure who they are or what they want with him, but you should know we're doing everything in our power to find him again. Somehow Izuku didn't quite believe it. We've never encountered these villains before, but they seem to be very experienced. One of them had a teleportation quirk, but that's all we know. We will keep you updated on our progress. Izuku didn't say anything. He just left. He was tired. If you use the signal just to get us to break you out, you're going to wish you stayed in jail, Tomura Shigaraki said, fingers tapping rapidly. Kiichi Kurata nodded hurriedly, fear playing on his features. I know. Don't worry, I had a good reason. There's a kid I think you'll be interested in, Izuku Midoriya. Apparently everyone, including him, thinks he's quirkless, but I'm almost positive he has an analysis quirk. And even if he doesn't, then he has incredible natural analysis abilities. He managed to figure out everything about my quirk, including the weakness, just from seeing me use it once. The kid would be invaluable. Tomura nodded, moving his hand to support his head as he began to tap his foot. Get out. I'll think it over. The terrified man nodded hurriedly, wasting no time in getting himself out of the room and fleeing. Is it worth it? Tomura asked the seemingly empty air. The speaker attached to one wall crackled to life. Analysis quirks are rare. Very rare, a scratchy voice mused. Investigate. The house should be empty if you find anything that shows he might be useful, bring him. The risk isn't high, and the potential reward of a quirk like that, oh, yes. It is worth it. Tomura nodded, standing up from where he'd been lounging in a chair. Yes, sensei. It will be done. Izuku had just managed to fall asleep when he fell through his bed, eyes fluttering open to be surrounded by purple mist. He didn't even have time to scream before he was deposited on the hard wooden floor of an unknown room. Teleportation quirk, uses portals made of some sort of mist, he automatically began thinking. Most likely the same quirk responsible for Kurata's escape. What could they possibly want from me? He looked up, and he was immediately greeted by two of the strangest looking people he'd ever laid eyes on. One, with light blue hair and disembodied hands, latched onto various parts of his body most, notably his face was flipping through a very familiar notebook. Izuku's eyes widened as he made out the words on the cover. Analysis for the future. Who are you? He asked, scrambling backwards as he rubbed the sleep out of his eyes. Why do you have my notebook? What do you want from me? The one with the hands all over him chuckled in delight, still reading from his notes. Finally, he snapped the notebook close, turning his attention to the cowering boy on the floor. We are the League of Villains, he said. And as for what we want from you, do you truly believe you are quirkless? The question threw Izuku for a loop. Well, what do you mean? Of course I'm quirkless, the doctor told me himself. The man shook his head with a TSK, waving the notebook around like it somehow proved his point. I'm starting to think that your doctor might have been incompetent, he confided. Or, if he was right, then you must simply be extraordinary. Do you really think the average person could gather all of this just from watching a hero's fights? Do you really think that even the heroes themselves know everything you've written in this book? It's just a hobby, he muttered, his worry growing with every passing second. Give me back my... And look at this. The man plowed on, giving no thought to what Izuku tried to say. It says right here, volume 15. We've only found 5 of them, and you wouldn't believe how much we've learned. Where are the others, Midoriya? How do you know my name? He asked. He was starting to panic. Well, you were all over the news. I bet you will be again come morning. Maybe even before then. What do you want? Izuku asked again. The man chuckled. We want you, Izuku Midoriya. We want your skill in analyzing quirks, your incredible understanding of how they can be used, exploited, and nullified. We want you to become a villain. Izuku recoiled. You're trying to recruit me, he said in disgust. You rescued the man who murdered my mother. How could you ever think I'd work with you? The man paused, then shrugged. We could kill him for you, if you'd like. Or we could let you do the honors. We don't really need him, not like we need you. Izuku shrank into himself. I just want to help people, he whimpered. I don't want to be a villain, I don't want to kill anyone. I just want to save people, that's all. You want to save people like All Might does, huh? The guy said. He crouched down to Izuku's level. You sure love him a lot. Your room was covered in so much All Might it was hard to notice anything else. Izuku just nodded silently. He knew it probably wasn't a good idea to admit his love for the hero to a group of villains, but he couldn't bring himself to care. What does All Might say when he saves the day? I am here. Well, was he there, Izuku Midoriya? His voice was a strange mix of mocking, sympathetic, and pained. Izuku couldn't help but meet his eyes. Was he? He asked again. No, Izuku whispered. No one was. Now, that's not true. You were there. You saved that poor girl's life. And then, you got arrested. Because of heroes, because of All Might. No one helps each other anymore, no one helped you, no one helped me, because they think, it's fine. A hero will take care of it. But they don't take care of us, and when we try to take care of ourselves, we get punished. Does that sound fair to you? No, it's not, but doesn't it all feel pointless? It doesn't matter if you kill, steal, save, or protect, you get punished. Doesn't it make you angry? Doesn't it make you want to destroy everything, the world that doesn't care? Izuku was trembling. He couldn't deny that the man was right, but he hated it. He hated the way that the fire that used to push him to become a hero, to save people from suffering, had shifted. He hated the way that same fire that defined who he was now burned on anger, bitterness, and urged him to destroy. No, he said. I can't. I want to destroy it too, but I won't hurt people just to make myself feel better. I'll change it, somehow. I'll make people see that they can't just rely on heroes, but I'll do it without the killing, the fear, and the suffering. I can't be a villain. The man sighed. Well, kid, that's where you're wrong. You'll help change it for sure, but you'll be doing it our way. I didn't want it to happen this way because it takes much longer and it's much more painful, but you're too valuable to just let go. Sensei, Kurogiri, it's your turn. Izuku fell through another portal before he could say a word, and a dark chuckle from behind him sent chills down his back. He slowly turned, but he couldn't see anything, it was completely black. You should have listened to Tomura, the voice said. But, I guess it's too late now. Don't worry, child, you'll make a fantastic villain. Deku was gone. When he didn't show up to school again, Bakugo was worried that something had happened again, but when he got home, he learned it was a lot worse than anything he could have predicted. First of all, Deku had been arrested. That hadn't been made known to the public until he disappeared last night, they were calling it an escape. Second of all, the asshole that had killed Inko Midoriya had been rescued. He was sitting in his cell when purple mist surrounded him and he just disappeared. The scariest part was that Deku had disappeared the same way. Escape? He'd been fucking kidnapped. Bakugo snarled, clenching his fist by his side. Well, no, he knew why Deku hadn't wanted to be a hero anymore. He'd gotten fucking arrested for helping that girl Mina. Anyone would be bitter. Bakugo himself was reconsidering, but he couldn't give up on his goal. He'd become a hero no matter what stupid rules they made. He had 10 months before he would be a full-time hero student at UA, after he passed the entrance exam. Those months would be spent training his ass off, and fuck needing a license trying his damn best to find out what the fuck happened to Deku. Mina was unresponsive. She stared at the TV in shock. What she was seeing couldn't be real, could it? Izuku Midoriya, the boy that had lost his mother saving her life, had gotten arrested for vigilantism, and then kidnapped from the detention center by villains. Their parents told her it wasn't her fault. She believed them, to an extent. She didn't choose to be targeted. But she had been, and she'd been completely helpless. She would have died if Izuku and his mother hadn't saved her. But, because they saved her, Inko Midoriya was dead, Izuku had gotten arrested, and now he'd been abducted by the same villain that rescued Kurata. The police were framing it as an escape of an inmate convicted of assault and vigilantism, which just made everything worse. The villain had been right, somehow, by saving her. Izuku had broken the law. She hadn't even known. She owed him her life, and she hadn't even cared enough to find out he'd been arrested for what he'd done for her. She was angry. At herself, mostly, but also at the world. At the society that thought it was fair to arrest people for saving lives. He'd just lost his mother. She wondered bitterly if she even wanted to be a hero anymore. "I think you have a really bright future as a hero," Izuku told her. "My mom did too. Be a great one for us, okay?" Mina took a deep breath, and then another, her eyes closed as she tried to get a hold of herself. She would do it. She would get into UA and become a hero, and she'd help save Izuku from whatever villains had taken him. Maybe it would make up for at least part of the trouble she'd caused him. Impressive. I would have thought he'd be a Nomu by now, but he's accepted every quirk I've given him without breaking. This last step will be more risky, though. He's the perfect spy, don't you think? All Might is teaching at UA too. With all these quirks, he'll get in no problem. Easily controlled. He has a strong will, but no one can resist that combination of brainwashing quirks. Why, Tomura, you haven't grown a soft spot for him, have you? You know he's just a tool. And that puts him in the same boat as us, doesn't it? Midoriya gasped as he sat up, an old bed creaking beneath him. Random bits and pieces of memories floated through his head, frustratingly out of reach. How long had he been with the League of Villains? His sense of time was as foggy as his memories, but judging by the familiarity of his surroundings, it had been a while. Weeks. Months. Not years, he was relatively certain. Definitely not years. If nothing else, our last memories of Koch-chan wouldn't be so fresh if it had been that long, said a voice in his head brightly. It doesn't matter how long, it was too long for me, another voice said, this time dark and furious. All I know is that it hurt, and I swear I'm going to kill him if it's the last thing I do. Hang on, am I crazy? Midoriya thought. Were those voices himself? They felt familiar too, so maybe he'd been crazy for a while. We all are, the first voice said sadly. It was the only way to cope. I couldn't survive the pain so I hid, but you're stronger than I am. Who are you? Midoriya asked. I'm Izuku. You mostly go by Midoriya now, the bright voice said. The other voice is less of a personality and more of an emotion. We call him Wrath. Wrath didn't respond, so he must be telling himself the truth. He shook his head, getting up and looking around. Tomura Shigaraki was leaning against his doorframe. Midoriya felt happy to see him, although that made no sense. What could have happened to make him like his captor? He thought of Quirk with unexpected fondness as well. Did it have something to do with the vague mention of brainwashing quirks he could almost remember? I'm happy to see you. Why the hell am I happy to see you? He asked. The bluntness was uncharacteristic, he realized. Maybe that was one of the differences between him and Izuku in his head. Tomura grinned. Now that's a hell of a question, isn't it? Probably Stockholm Syndrome. Midoriya snorted. He was cracking jokes with his captors now. What on earth had happened to him? It's like Beauty and the Beast, he found himself quipping back. For more than one reason, it's pretty obvious that I'm the beauty. That got a chuckle, but no response. All for One wants to see you, Tomura said. Come down to the bar. Midoriya tensed. Whatever had transpired between him and some of the members of the League, his opinion and experiences with All for One were still very much negative. He couldn't remember anything specific about him, other than the pain. The pain that had apparently shattered his mind. Still, he made himself follow Shigaraki down the stairs. The Izuku in his head pulled back, hiding from the encounter they were about to have. He wished he could do the same, but at the same time he couldn't back down. That was another striking difference from how he remembered himself being, the fiery rebelliousness that made him want to spit in All for One's face, just as much as he wanted to cower away. He entered the lobby, and he felt the temperature drop from All for One's presence. Oh, how he hated that man. Welcome, young Midoriya. I see that your memories were successfully wiped. Now, let's make sure the rest of our work stayed intact. Tonight is your test. As an extra incentive to do your best for us, I've decided to allow you to perform tasks that you might not hate. For example, as long as you keep me happy, I will let you do vigilante hero work and fight against rival villain groups, rather than against heroes. If you disappoint me with your results, you will be executing our prisoners until you can please me again. Do you understand? Midoriya found himself compulsively nodding his head, even though he'd like nothing more than to take the man's head off. He paused. That train of thought was unexpectedly violent. Well, you'd better get started. You can do whatever you want, but I need information on the 8 precepts of death by morning. Don't disappoint me. Midoriya found his feet carrying him through the door and into the night, and he realized what those brainwashing quirks he remembered were doing to him. Every time All for One gave him an order, he was thrown into the back seat of his own body, and he was forced to obey. The thought made him tremble with rage. So this was his test. The 8 precepts of death. Somehow, he remembered that they were a gang led by a man going by Overhaul, though he couldn't remember ever learning that information. The area they operated in had a significant overlap with the area that Night Eye's agency presided over, All Might's former assistant. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in a window as he walked by, and he froze. He was different. He had the same proportions, vaguely, but somehow probably using a shape-shifting quirk. All for One had completely altered his face until he was unrecognizable. His hair was a dull brown, his eyes smaller, his mouth thinner. With a bit of effort, he was able to change his hair color to black, which meant the shifting was the result of a quirk that had been permanently given to Midoriya. Still, it was better not to show his real face for what he was about to do. He can do whatever he wants, huh? He grinned. Oh, All for One was going to regret this. Bakugo had never paid super close attention to the news, but that had changed over the last 10 months. Deku was still missing, and they had absolutely no leads on where he could have gone. Bakugo himself was the only reason the investigation hadn't been dropped. He found one of Deku's notebooks in his backpack, and shown it to the police, convincing them he would be a real danger if left in enemy hands. Still, though the search yielded no results, the news had been quiet and uninteresting, until last night. A new vigilante had suddenly appeared near Sir Night Eye's hero agency, taking out some thugs before getting into a scuffle with Night Eye himself. Although they tried to paint him in a negative light, the people he'd saved were gushing about his heroism in their interviews. It was obvious that the public already loved him. The most surprising part was that he'd gotten away. The new vigilante didn't bother hiding his face, and it was obviously not Deku, but still, something about the situation reeked of his convoluted plans and excessive thinking. Bakugo had no idea how it could possibly be related, but watching the events on camera, he just felt in his gut that Deku was somehow involved. Unfortunately, he didn't have time to look into it yet. The UA entrance exam was coming up just the day after tomorrow, and he was going to crush it. Midoriya still wasn't quite sure how, but he'd gotten away with it. He'd gotten the information All for One needed, so he wasn't punished, but he also came into direct contact with Sir Night Eye successfully. During the encounter, Midoriya had dropped hints during his taunting, subtle enough that anyone other than that particular hero would have most likely missed it. He'd shown hints of his possession of multiple quirks, vaguely referencing that he served a powerful boss, while giving him meaningful looks. He intentionally got close enough for hand-to-hand combat and looked into his eyes, allowing Sir Night Eye to use his quirk on him before letting him go. The hero had done it incredibly skillfully, making it look as though Midoriya had really gotten the better of him, but Midoriya was nearly positive that the pro-hero could have stopped him if he'd wanted to. All for One didn't trust Midoriya completely, not yet, but he did have confidence in himself to a fault. The leader of the villains was so sure of himself and his skills, he often overlooked small details and mistakes. Due to his raw power, he'd never had to worry about it before, but then again, he'd never had to deal with anyone like Izuku Midoriya before either. Small details and mistakes. Mistakes like explicitly forbidding Midoriya from helping the heroes fight against him. Mistakes like explicitly forbidding Midoriya from killing him when he got the chance. Those mistakes would catch up to him eventually, Midoriya knew. When he'd come back, All for One had been wearing a grim smile, like this was exactly what he'd been going for. Midoriya, fully aware that Sir Night Eye's quirk allowed him to see everything he did and also aware that the man's morality would stop him from looking further than what he needed to know about All for One, made sure to avoid contact with Tomura and Kurogiri until the next day. He still didn't know why he felt a certain fondness for them, but until he figured it out, he only wanted to betray All for One, not the whole team. A life of vigilantism where he was allowed to save people to his heart's content, as long as he also expanded the League's power in the criminal underworld, was something he could get used to, while he developed his plan to kill All for One. Unfortunately, that wasn't the life he was going to get. "You want me to what?" he said, his voice a disgruntled mix between incredulous and completely done. He had to work to keep wrath quiet enough to hear All for One's words over his own internal screaming. "Tomorrow is the entrance exam for UA, where All Might is teaching this year. I've had Kurogiri construct a background for you, with all of the legal documents and records you might possibly need. You'll be going under the name Michi Hamasaki, and you must be as pure and outstanding as you can. If you can get All Might to pass on one for all to you, even better." The man paused for a moment before continuing, his normally stoic voice betraying his extreme irritation. "Now, there are some things that go without saying, but over the last 10 months you have taught me that nothing goes without saying for you. Midoriya, you will never under any circumstances reveal anything about the League of Villains." Even though he almost staggered when he heard he'd been a captive for that long, Midoriya barely refrained from smirking. It was one day too late for that. However, All for One wasn't done. "You will try your best to convince All Might, without being too obvious, to give you one for all. If he offers it to you, you will accept. And, of course, while you are being trained, you will be a true hero. Your natural personality, while difficult to work with and shape into a villain, is the perfect cover for being in a hero school. Save as many people as you can or want, become the shining star of UA, become an idol. We will use you to destroy All Might and everyone's faith in their heroes at the same time." Midoriya found himself nodding without his consent. He scowled, mind already racing for loopholes. This face has already been seen by the public as a vigilante, he realized. How should I change my appearance? I don't care. Just don't make it recognizable from your vigilante work or as Izuku Midoriya. The exam is tomorrow morning, you'd better get ready. Midoriya left, heading up the stairs to his room. He assumed he'd either be staying here, or he'd be sent to a cover house with some more of All for One's lackeys, to pretend to be his parents. We're going to hero school. Izuku cheered in his head. Midoriya rolled his eyes. Stop saying wait, it's weird. I'm the same person as you, he said. No, you're not, Izuku said. We share a mind and a body, but we're not the same. You like revenge too much, and you don't care as much about saving people and being a hero. Midoriya considered. He felt a rush of fulfillment and satisfaction when he'd saved those people from the goons last night, but was it just Izuku? He stopped, realizing he needed to go back down the stairs and talk to All for One. There was still so much he didn't know and couldn't remember, and he knew the old bastard could tell him at least part of it. By the time he made it back into the bar, Kurogiri was the only one there, standing behind the counter and cleaning a cup. With his head wreathed in a dark purple shadow while the rest of his body was clad in an elegant suit, he was certainly one of the most professionally intimidating people Midoriya had ever seen. Where's All for One? Midoriya asked. Kurogiri raised an eyebrow. You're looking for him? He asked in surprise. Why? There's a lot I need to know before going to school. I still don't even know which quirks he forced on me, other than the ability to change how I look. Ah, the man said in realization. Well, that is something I can help you with. No need to call him. Firstly, as I'm not sure you remember, you were not quirkless before you came here. Midoriya raised an eyebrow. I wasn't. Kurogiri shook his head. Your quirk was analysis, though you didn't know how to use it. You use a part of your abilities when you watch the hero fights, but you didn't even unlock a fraction of its potential, until All for One forced it out of you with his training. He also gave you the quirk research as an experiment, because he believes its effect will combine with your analysis to make it exponentially more effective. Unlike analysis, research requires a physical touch to activate, and it lets you see information about an individual's quirk and personality. Other than that, in disguise to change your looks, the rest of the quirks he gave you are passive. You have Regenerate to improve your healing, Resilience to decrease damage from physical attacks, and Energy Absorption to nullify heat or electricity attacks. He considered giving you Shock Absorption as well, but unfortunately we already have a use for that particular quirk. Midoriya stared at his hands in confusion. Maybe it was his analysis quirk working out all of the ways his combination of quirks could be used. He certainly wasn't a heavy hitter, but he could feel the power he wielded all the same. If he could really get All Might to give him one for all, putting an end to All for One with his own hands was suddenly a very reachable goal. In all honesty, it's a shock that you didn't turn into a Nomu, Kurogiri admitted. I've never seen anyone receive so many quirks and come out with their mind intact. Sort of intact, Midoriya muttered absent-mindedly, imagining the ways a fight could go down against a quirk-like endeavors. He ignored Izuku's protests against fighting a hero, wanting to test himself all the same. Fire as strong as endeavors didn't have many counters. He realized what he'd said when Kurogiri gave him a curious look, but he just shrugged. I've got issues, but that's to be expected after whatever the bastard did to me. I can't even remember properly, and I'm still scared of him. Kurogiri said nothing, turning back to his work. Midoriya wondered if he was angry with him for badmouthing All for One, or maybe mad at All for One for what he'd done to Midoriya. Maybe he just didn't care. Without really knowing how deep their bond went, it was impossible to tell. Midoriya shrugged off his thoughts. He went to a mirror and changed his features once again for his new identity as Michi Hamasaki, giving himself a stronger nose and jawline, wavy light blue hair, and harsh purple eyes. He thought about going for a more innocent, babyish look, but he worried that would just remind people like Koch-chan, who, there was no doubt in Midoriya's mind, would also get accepted of his actual identity. Besides, if people were busy thinking and talking about the contrast between the dangerous appearance and overly kind personality, they wouldn't be very likely to look any further into his past. Finally, new identity finished, he went out into the city to test the prowess of his quirks. He wandered the streets, random shops, even the mall despite the awful memories, brushing against random people's shoulders and activating his research quirk. Kurogiri's explanation of the quirk was probably accurate, but combined with analysis, All for One had been right to assume they would complement each other. Midoriya knew he should start thinking of himself as Michi hated to admit when the man was right, but considering how much it helped him, he was willing to look past it just this once. He was glad he took this time to practice. If he tried to use it for the first time during combat, he would have been overwhelmed and lost immediately. Just with a slight brush against their shoulder, he could see their emotional state, any old injuries, their quirk, as well as its uses, weaknesses, and more. Until he got more practice, though, he would just focus on reading those specific aspects to avoid getting overwhelmed. All too soon, the day was coming to an end. He thought about making another appearance as a vigilante. He knew he was all over the news, and that excited him, though he wasn't sure if they'd given him a name yet. In the end, though, he decided that it would be a much better idea to get some sleep. He wasn't sure what to expect from the exam tomorrow, and he needed to be ready for anything. Michi tripped on his way into the exam. An unexpectedly kind girl had caught him with her gravity quirk, which made him a new friend, but he was still frustrated. All for one had insisted that he use disguise to make himself taller, which not only completely drained his energy, but also made him keep tripping over himself and hitting his head. He was getting the hang of it, so it shouldn't affect his performance too badly, but it was still unbelievably irritating. He took a deep breath. He tripped in front of everyone, which basically just showed everyone that he was a klutz, right? Clumsiness could be endearing, if he played it right. It certainly didn't make anyone think he was dangerous. He nodded, following the instructors to the testing site. Battle Center B was ridiculously enormous, and there were multiple of them. How much money had gone into this? Was it really necessary? Michi immediately dismissed the thoughts, recognizing that he was thinking too much like Midoriya. Michi needed to be somewhere in between Midoriya and Izuku in idealism and kindness, but even though it was closer to Izuku on that spectrum, Midoriya didn't trust his other personalities' acting skills at all. So, that left Midoriya struggling to remember to be kind, starry-eyed, and motivated. It was a struggle, but he'd manage. He was motivated, after all, and it was for at least some of the right reasons. He found that letting Izuku closer to the surface helped positively influence his attitude. He stood casually, apart and silent as the others talked amongst themselves, staring at the looming gates. They were cracked open so he could see inside, which made him wonder. He scanned the others taking the test, taking note of anyone he found interesting. There was the gravity quirk girl, trying to hype herself up. There was a ridiculously flamboyant blonde boy with a belt that always seemed to look like he was posing for a picture. There was a severe-looking boy with short dark blue hair and glasses, tubes coming from his calves. Probably a speed-type quirk, though he obviously hadn't neglected training the rest of his body, judging by his impressively muscular physique. He started to make his way over to the girl to thank her, but the boy with the glasses stopped him on his way there. "That girl appears to be trying to focus," he said. "What are you doing here? Are you taking the entrance exam to interfere with everyone else?" "Chill out, man, I'm just trying to say thank you. She caught me when I tripped back at the school," Michi replied. "Yes, I saw," he said. "Still, don't. Okay, start." A voice screamed suddenly, startling the students. Michi recognized the voice as President Mick, and he immediately took off into the battle center, while the other kids stared at each other in confusion. Behind him, he heard Mick say, "What's wrong? There are no countdowns in real fights. Run, run. The die has been cast, you know." Even with his significant head start, he guessed he only had a moment before the boy with the glasses caught up to him. A robot suddenly burst through a wall to his left, and Michi dove to the side to avoid getting crushed. He consciously activated his analysis, knowing that research would do nothing against non-living objects. Rating the somewhat jerky movements, he dodged through the flailing arms and rolled to his feet behind it, spotting a small red button on its back. He slapped it before the thing could turn around, and it deactivated immediately. He grinned. 1 point down. Even as he raced through the vacant streets to destroy the robots, he couldn't help but keep getting distracted by all the quirks around him. This was Izuku's dream, to be able to analyze so many quirks with so much potential. But, he kept reminding himself, he wasn't Izuku right now. He needed to be Michi, and obsessing over quirks would definitely catch the attention of anyone still thinking about him, like Koch-chan for example. He occasionally teamed up with other examinees, though they usually had more destructive quirks than his, and ended up getting the points more often than not. Still, Michi was having a blast, he had to admit. He kept looking for something huge to really show off his heroic nature, but the exam was drawing to a close, and he needed to catch up on points. Even though he'd fought countless robots by now, he only had 17 points since the other kids kept finishing it off. Right as he was about to give up and just bash as many robots as he could in the last couple minutes, he felt a rumble under his feet. Unbidden, a smile crept onto his face. This was it, the catalyst. It was UA after all, they couldn't just have the kids beat up low-level robots. A shadow loomed behind him, and he whirled around to see a robot towering as high as the buildings, dozens of stories high. He recognized the shape, though. It was one of the Border Patrol robots that President Mick had told them was worth no points. He groaned to himself. Even for a hero course, the thing was overkill. An enormous challenge with absolutely no reward to fight. He stopped. Wait a minute. If a kid actually went for that, there's no way they would reject him. They told them it was worth no points, but it had to be worth something. Grin back on his face, he started sprinting towards the thing, dodging around all of the other students running in the other direction. If he really wanted to stage it as heroic, maybe he could even make it look like a rescue. As he got closer, he heard a cry of pain. He felt a twinge of shame for how excited he got, especially when it turned out to be the girl that had been so kind before. He slid to a stop next to her, scanning the heavy debris that was trapping her foot for leverage. "Use your gravity on the rock, I'll lift it for you," he said hurriedly. She nodded, reaching back until she could touch the slab of cement. Michi lifted the now weightless slab, realizing it was much bigger than he'd first thought. He looked from the girl climbing to her feet, to the cement, to the robot. He smiled again. "How long can you hold this up?" he asked. She put a hand to her mouth, squeezing her eyes shut through a bout of nausea. "Not long," she said. "Alright, just start running. Release it when I say." She nodded determinedly, staggering off as fast as she could without throwing up or releasing the stone slab. Michi gripped a piece of rebar protruding from the cement, and he started spinning it around to gain momentum. Once he was moving fast enough, he gauged the angle up at the thing's face, calculated the trajectory by activating analysis, and let go. The enormous hunk of cement and steel went whirling towards the towering enemy at a ridiculous speed, much too fast for one of its hands to block. "Now? Release it now," he yelled, and luckily she heard him. He saw the girl put her fingers together and mutter, "Release," and it began to curve downwards as gravity took hold once more. The robot might have been a monstrosity, but even something like that couldn't survive a 2-ton brick flying at 50 miles per hour straight to the head. Michi watched in satisfaction as it crashed to the floor, a huge dust cloud billowing up around them. Remembering to stay true to his supposedly heroic nature, he quickly ran back and found the girl he'd saved. She was leaning heavily on a broken piece of machinery, throwing up on the floor. "Are you okay?" he asked worriedly, running over to comfort her. He patted her on the back as she groaned, obviously not doing very well. "That quirk of yours is amazing," he told her. He cursed silently at himself. Not quirks. Hard work, he decided. Michi idolized hard work. "You must have trained really hard to be able to lift things that heavy." She nodded, laughing weakly. "Yeah, this isn't the first time I've thrown up for working it too hard," she admitted. "It is the first time anyone has thought to use it like that, though. That was incredible." "You did all the work," he said dismissively. "All I did was take advantage of your skills." "No, you were the one that saved me," she said stubbornly. Michi hid a grin. He'd always thought that arguments over pushing the credit around were stupid, but it fit into his self-sacrificial character with a hero complex, so he went along with it. "This is an application to a hero course," he protested. "What did you expect me to do, not be a hero?" She shook her head ruefully. "I would have been too scared to move," she said. "You were acting like this was just standard procedure." "Well, I couldn't just leave you," he said, rolling his eyes. She blushed, and he realized he may have accidentally come off as quite suave. "I owed you for catching me back at UA, after all." "Time's up." Michi jumped at the sound, slapping his forehead with his hand. "Ah, dang it, I kept getting distracted, I only got 17 points. He shrugged with a sigh, turning to the girl. "I'll bet you got like 40 or something, right? You're awesome." "Oh, I never asked, what's your name?" "Ah, right. My name is Ichako Araka. What's yours?" she asked. "I'm Michi Hamasaki," he said with a smile, shaking her hand. "So, how do you think you did?" He started walking back towards the entrance with her, reveling in the way everyone was staring at him. "Well, all for one. How's that for a star student?" "Oh, I did alright. I think I got 28 points, but I'm not sure if that's enough," she said worriedly. "I'll bet you did awesome," he said, grinning at her. They'd reached the exit, and the students were all separating to go their separate ways. They all kept staring at him and muttering, and he was starting to wonder if they even knew that Ichako's quirk was involved. Well, if she didn't correct them, he would feign obliviousness. No need to suppress his reputation. "Bye, Ichako. I hope I'll see you in class." Her eyes hardened, and she nodded. "See you later, Michi," she called. Michi Hamasaki grinned as he walked back to the League of Villains. Mission accomplished. Denki Konari winced as he fried yet another robot. It didn't hurt as much as it used to, but so much electricity coursing through your nerves still wasn't pleasant. To make it worse, he was getting pretty close to his limit. Coherent thought was getting harder, and pretty soon he'd be reduced to a helpless, gibbering mess, as his brain short-circuited. He felt himself slipping and paused for a moment, closing his eyes to focus. He didn't go through everything he did just to fry his brain a couple minutes into the exam. He managed to get a hold of himself, opening his eyes and sprinting through the streets, looking for more enemies. He'd been doing well, but he'd admit that he hadn't been the smartest with his power. There was this girl in his battle center, Kyokujiro, that had gotten his attention, and he just might have gone overboard to show off when he knew she could see him. He turned a corner and grinned to himself when he saw her again, temporarily immobilizing a robot with a vibration blast, before using her extendable earphone jacks to press a button on the back of its neck, deactivating it. Unluckily for her, 3 more of the higher level ones burst out from inside a building all around her, pelting her with bits of debris. His first thought was, well, it's just a test. I should see how she does, it could be cool. Then he remembered his dad telling him about this part of the exam. You won't die, but they have recovery girl on site so they won't hold back, either. If you slip up, you could end up with some broken bones. He really did not want to watch the punk rock girl that he just decided he liked get any bones broken, so he broke into a sprint. He reached the first robot just as they all converged, sending a carefully controlled wave of electricity to short-circuit them without shocking Kyoka. Unfortunately, the power expenditure sent him just over the edge, and he felt a familiar fog settle over his mind. "Thanks," he heard Kyoka say, sounding like she was far away. "It was Konari, right?" "Yay," he said, giving her a thumbs up with what he knew to be the dumbest expression ever on his face. "Yay." She burst into laughter. "Are you okay? What happened?" "Yay." "Okay then," she said, drawing out the O. "I'll be seeing you, I guess." She ran off. He had one more coherent thought through the haze. Damn it. Well, so much for that. By the time he came to himself, he was sitting on his couch back home. He grabbed his head with a groan, and his mom poked her head into the room. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, I'm back to earth," he said tiredly. "I don't know how well I did, though. I shorted out sooner than I should have." "Oh really?" she asked curiously. "How come?" Konari sighed to himself. His mom loved talking about this sort of thing, and she would figure it out no matter what he said. Might as well just tell her. Well, there was this girl. He was cut off by her excited squeal, and he winced as the sound exacerbated his headache. Finally. "Oh, there's something special about this one, isn't there? I like her already." "You haven't even met her," Denki said, confused. What was different this time? Although he did have a tendency to fall hard and fast for certain girls, it didn't happen very often. And his mom hadn't reacted this way to any of his other crushes. "I can sense this kind of thing," she said, clicking her tongue. "Now, what happened?" "I talked to her before the exam and got her name, and she seemed really cool. The kind of punk rock vibe, you know. Then during the exam, I kept noticing her nearby, and I would go a little overboard to show off. Then she got trapped by these robot things we were supposed to fight, and I managed to take them all out for her without shocking her, which was really hard." He stopped, putting his face into his hands. He didn't want to talk about this part. "And then?" his mom pressed, obviously uncaring of her son's reluctance. "That's when I short-circuited," he finally admitted. "She said thank you and asked me a couple of questions, but all I could do was say yay like some sort of idiot. I completely embarrassed myself." "Oh dear," his mom said with a chuckle. "Well, if you ended up spending more time together, she would have found out anyway, right? It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal, Mom. We just barely knew each other. It's not like I got the chance to explain what happens and why. I just randomly showed up and helped her, then turned into a freaking vegetable." His mom started laughing, and he glared at her. As she got herself under control, she asked, "And what was her reaction?" "She was really confused, and she laughed," he said with a grimace. "When she couldn't get anything else out of me, she just ran off." "Well, that doesn't matter. You two will meet again, I'm sure of it. It's like it's my quirk, you could say," she said confidently. She seemed to register what she has just said, and she deflated. Denki winced. It had been almost a year since his mom's quirk had just disappeared. She had energy absorption, which coupled perfectly with his dad's static shock. One of the reasons the two had gotten together was because his dad was so taken with someone that wasn't afraid to touch him. It was an understandably sore subject, even more so because of the strain it put on their relationship when they had to be so careful around each other all of a sudden. No one could understand what had happened. Interrupting them from their sober thoughts, the doorbell rang. Denki quickly shot to his feet, wanting to give his mom some time to compose herself before greeting whoever was there. When he got there, though, it wasn't a guest. It was a mailman, and he was holding a letter that made Denki's heart start thundering in his chest with anxiety. Why? Because that was UA's stamp clearly on the red seal. His letter had come. He took it with shaking hands, gave a quick thank you to the deliverer, and shot back into the sitting room to tell his mother. "It's here," he gasped, and her face lit up. He was impatient to rip it open, but when they got to the table and got his dad, he stared at it. There was a good chance he didn't make it. The acceptance rate was less than 1 in 300. "Go on," his mom prompted. He took a deep breath and nodded, tearing open the envelope. He reached in and pulled out a small metal disc, turning it in his hands in confusion before putting it on the table, and reaching back into the envelope to pull out the papers. As soon as he did, though, the small circle lit up and a holographic depiction of All Might appeared in the room, making Denki involuntarily drop the envelope. "I am here," he boomed, then laughed. "That's right. This year, I will be a teacher at UA High School. Now, Denki Konari, shall we go over the exam?" The image changed to show clips of Denki's test footage, racing around and taking out the robots with flashes of his electricity. He'd rack up 31 points by the time the camera angle changed, showing Jiro take out her own robot, before 3 more burst onto the scene around her. "Ooh, she is cute," his mom said, clapping her hands. Denki's face flushed bright red, but he kept watching as he rushed to the scene, actually looking quite impressive in his opinion, as he fried the 3 robots around her. Then, unfortunately, the footage continued. Even his parents couldn't help but laugh as he did a complete 180 from the baddest rescue a moment ago to an unresponsive vegetable that just smiled like an idiot, giving thumbs up and saying yay, while Jiro tried to talk to him. When she ran off, the scene ended. Unfortunately, Denki, you did not get enough fill-in points to pass the test, All Might said, coming back into the image. Denki deflated. However, luckily for you, that isn't the only way students earn points. We can't just turn away a student that rushes into danger to help others. For your heroic actions, you are rewarded 20 rescue points. With a score of 51, you have passed the exam. Welcome to you, future hero. I look forward to seeing you in class. The device shut off. Konari sat in silence for a short moment before jumping up out of his chair, letting out a loud cheer. He turned to his parents, who had small grins on their faces as they exchanged a look he couldn't interpret. What? He asked. Nothing, his mom said, laughing. You just sound so surprised. Do you think All Might made a video for every single applicant? His dad said. Considering how fast this got here, I doubt he even did it for everyone that made it. It's probably only for kids that got into the hero course. We knew you'd gotten in the second the video started, and he said your name, his mom agreed. He blushed, scratching the back of his neck uncomfortably. Oh, yeah, he said. I didn't think about that. So, his mom said, leading him back to the couch and sitting him down. Tell me about the girl. What's her name? What's her quirk called? How does it work? I can see why you were so determined to impress her. Konari turned blushed yet again, not sure if he regretted telling his mom about her or not. Considering the fact Jiro was in the video, he probably would have ended up getting interrogated anyway. His mom really did have a sixth sense for this kind of thing, almost like it actually was a quirk. He glanced at the clock as he started talking, his mom still firing off questions rapid fire. He'd be going to bed late tonight. Midoriya grinned from where he was lounging at the bar, as the device portrayed his most impressive moments in the exam. It ended with the grand finale of him launching the 2 tons of cement through the huge robot's head, and as he suspected, from an outsider's glance, it looked like he did it all on his own. When All Might appeared back on the screen and gave him 60 hero points before telling him he'd been accepted, even the pro hero looked impressed. So, what do you think? He asked Shigaraki and Kurogiri. Enough for the boss. How did you do that at the end? Tomoura asked instead of answering, sounding bewildered. Sensei never gave you any strength enhancement. Midoriya laughed. The girl's quirk that I saved was zero gravity. I just had her make the cement weightless for me to throw it before letting it go right before it hit, he explained. Sure looks impressive though, doesn't it? Tomoura allowed a smirk as he shook his head. You always were tricky, you little devil. As for Sensei, I'm sure even he'll be impressed. Midoriya had a wince at Tomoura's continued use of Sensei to describe All for One. Midoriya hated him, and he hated being reminded that Tomoura, who he'd somehow come to consider as a friend, however that work still respected him so much. Izuku still cringed away from both Shigaraki and Kurogiri, and Midoriya figured he should too, but the familiarity and trust that seemed to exist between the three of them made him think they had to have earned it somehow. He desperately hoped the emotions weren't implanted into him by All for One. Midoriya suddenly realized that All for One, in a strange way, could be considered his father. He knew he'd just been Izuku before, the rebellion, the sass, the desire for revenge, none of that had ever been a part of him before his time with the villain. He hated that train of thought, because as much as he hated All for One, he really liked existing. He preferred to think of it as Izuku creating him to protect him from All for One, but the villain had been the one to shatter his mind in the first place. At Izuku's insistence, he suited up and changed his appearance, including his height, back to how he'd appeared as a vigilante. Shrinking wasn't nearly as draining as growing was, which was fortunate, but he dreaded the thought of having to shrink and grow taller every time he wanted to do vigilante work. He once again took to the streets, going back to look into the 8 precepts of death. Not only did All for One want more information, but Izuku was insisting he could feel someone begging for someone to rescue them from the group. Midoriya trusted nothing above his instincts when it came to danger and battle, but he had to admit Izuku's instincts for heroics and rescue were just as sharp. If only his other personality wasn't such a crybaby. Checking his equipment, he set out on his mission. Someone was crying for help, and he would answer. No law, no villain, and no obstacle would stop him. That's why he was called the. Damn it, he really needed a name. Midoriya no, he was Michi right now was early to class. He made it into Hero Class 1A, and All Might would supposedly be teaching them regularly. In a very unusual occurrence, All for One had praised him for catching the hero's eye in his debut. He smirked at the memory, he loved showing up his naysayers. To Michi's surprise, there were already a couple of students in the classroom. There was a beautiful girl with her black hair pulled up into a ponytail, although she looked too uptight to be really attractive to him, along with a boy with a half-red, half-white head of hair and a burned scar over one eye. The last one was the boy with engines for legs he'd met during the entrance exam, but now he looked like he had an even bigger stick up his ass. Engine Boy and Ponytail Girl were obviously star students that were early because of their dedication to their schoolwork, but the last boy didn't give off the same vibe. Michi walked over to him and sat down in the seat next to him, before turning towards him to strike up a conversation. "My name is Michi Hamasaki, what's yours?" he said, offering his hand to shake. The other boy glanced at his hand before looking away again, but he did answer the question. "Shoto Todoroki." Michi pursed his lips. Normally, it wouldn't be a big deal and he'd brush it off, but Shoto was intriguing, and research could only be activated through touch. No handshake. That's cold, man. We just met. Shoto just rolled his eyes, and Michi reluctantly lowered his hand. "So, Todoroki, are you Endeavor's son?" he asked. Shoto's eyes briefly shone with the kind of rage that Michi reserved for All for One, but he quickly covered it up. "Yes," he said shortly. "Ah, I see you don't like him much. I think we'll get along just great," Michi said. At Shoto's curious glance, he elaborated. "Endeavor sucks. He reminds me too much of," he hesitated. "What would he even call All for One?" He remembered his thoughts the previous night and, though he hated to call him that, said, "My dad." Shoto finally looked at him. Apparently the distaste in Michi's voice when he called All for One his dad had caught the boy's attention. "He does?" Shoto asked him. Michi nodded. "That sucks," he said. Michi couldn't help but laugh. The other kids started filling in, the class start time drawing closer. Michi watched as they arrived, trying to briefly analyze each one. One had an impressively generic face, with straight black hair and big knobs on his elbows. Michi wondered what they did. It was obviously part of his quirk. Another had a mutation quirk that made his head look like it was made of rock. The way he moved made it obvious he was very timid, which was an odd trait for a hopeful hero. One was a big guy with even bigger lips. He looked friendly, if not particularly bright. A flamboyant blonde with a belly button laser was among them, with every movement he made looking like he was striking a pose. Another blonde with a contagious smile and a small black lightning design in his hair, strolled in with his hands in his pockets, looking like he had too much energy. A bit later came a girl with short purple hair and a similar design, with headphone jacks dangling from her earlobes. She had slanted bangs and fiddled with her ear jacks nervously, though she looked confident enough. When she entered the room, the energetic blonde perked up noticeably, getting her attention and waving. She hid a laugh, and he winced. Michi wondered what that was about. Next was, what was that? Some kid that looked like a toddler with weird little balls for hair. He honestly made it into UA. Michi decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. He had to be something special if he made it over the hundreds, or even thousands of kids that failed. One was a girl with an invisibility quirk. Well, it looked like an animated set of empty clothing, but he assumed it was more than that. There was a kid with a black bird's head in place of a normal human head, and he was hard to get a read on. A large, intimidating boy with 6 arms came in wearing a mask over the bottom of his face, which made Michi curious. Izuku was practically having a stroke at the wide array of fascinating quirks, but Michi just pushed him to the back of his mind and ignored him. A loud kid with specky red hair and a smile just as ready as the happy blonde came in, bringing a kind of fierce excitement that Michi couldn't help but pick up on. He immediately hit off with the aforementioned blonde, and the two of them combined were almost overwhelmingly energetic. The next one was a girl with a frog-like mutation quirk, which was vague enough to be either incredibly useful or remarkably dull. It depended on which frog-like trait she got, and how many. The class was filling up. A boy with a tail came in and found his seat, which was impressive. The tail was pretty massive. Michi was surprised he could sit down at all. He heard someone clear their throat, and he turned to see the friendly-looking guy with the big lips shifting awkwardly. You're in my seat," he muttered. "The seating chart is up front." "Oh, right," Michi said with a laugh, getting up and moving out of the way. "Sorry about that." "It's fine, really," the other boy said, smiling as he slid into his seat. Michi turned to head up to the front of the class and almost tripped. "You have got to be kidding me." While he'd been turned around, 2 more students had arrived. Those 2 students were Katsuki Bakugo and Mina Ashido. He recovered quickly, but he knew that the watchful gaze of Shoto Todoroki hadn't missed it. "Seriously? The 2 people I know that went to hero school, and they're both in my class." He groaned to himself. "What do you mean?" Izuku replied happily. "This is great. I'm Miss Koch-chan, and I was worried I'd never see Mina again." "No, this is not great. I might just be overestimating how much they cared about us, but those 2 people are the most likely people to still be thinking about us. I need your help to act like a real hero, but if I let any of your mannerisms, habits, or personality through, they might notice. Especially Bakugo, he knew us very well." Izuku didn't have a response to that. Michi kept his internal conflict from his face as he checked his seating chart, and then he almost swore. He was literally right behind Bakugo. With a lot of effort, he stayed relaxed and casual as he took his seat behind Bakugo. Bakugo, of course, being Bakugo, leaned back and kicked his feet up on his desk, which then got the attention of the engine kid with the stick up his ass. "Don't put your feet on the desk," the kid said. "Huh?" Bakugo responded, a derisive smirk growing on his face. Don't you think it's rude to the upperclassmen and the people that made the desks? He pressed. In typical Bakugo fashion, he responded, nope. What stuck-up middle school did you go to, you side character? The other kid seemed to gather himself for an introduction. I attended Same Private Academy. My name is Tenya Ida. He held out his hand, like he was expecting Bakugo to shake it. Same? Bakugo sneered. So you're a damn elite, huh? I'll have fun crushing you. The kid, Tenya, gasped in surprise. Crushing? That's cruel. Are you really aiming to be a hero? Bakugo scoffed, not deigning to answer. Just then, the door opened and Ichako, the gravity girl, came in. Everyone had quieted down to watch the argument between Tenya and Bakugo, and Michi felt a little bit bad for Ichako when everyone's attention went to her as the last one to arrive. She blushed and ducked her head as she scurried to her seat, but Michi managed to catch her attention and wave. She brightened back up immediately. Tenya seemed to notice Michi sitting right behind Bakugo, and his eyes widened. Oh, it's you, he said, offering his hand again to shake. I'm from Same Private Academy. My name is... Yeah, I heard you the first time, Michi said, taking his hand. He thought about activating research, but it could only be used a couple of times a day, and to be honest, Tenya didn't look that interesting. My name is Michi Hamasaki. Michi, you realized there was something more to that practical exam, didn't you? Tenya said. I guess there was, yeah, Michi said with a shrug. Tenya sighed and looked at the floor. I had no idea, I misjudged you. He grimaced. I hate to admit it, but you are better than me. Michi raised an eyebrow, a grin spreading across his face. He made sure to let Izuku a little closer to the surface, so he looked more embarrassed and pleased rather than just proud. Thank you, he said. Just then, Michi caught a glimpse of something moving at the corner of his eye. When he turned to look, he saw something like a giant yellow worm sliding across the floor. It rolled towards him, and a face appeared. Oh, it was a sleeping bag. The face in question looked worn out enough to sleep for a month, with bloodshot eyes and a scruffy start of a beard. Welcome to the hero course, he said with the most apathetic voice imaginable, not standing up. He partially unzipped his sleeping bag and pulled out a packet of something with a straw, sucking out the contents before standing up, still in the sleeping bag. He finally unzipped it, stepping out reluctantly. I am your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Nice to meet you. If Michi wasn't so thrown off by meeting him, he would have laughed at how the entire class seemed to shift uncomfortably. This is kind of sudden, but put this on and meet me out in the field, he said, pulling out a gym uniform. With that, he left. We have a weird homeroom teacher, Michi said out loud before he could stop himself. Luckily, the rest of the class agreed. The Quirk assessment test. The entire class seemed to say in unison, voices all filled with disbelief. What about the entrance ceremony? The orientation? Ichako asked, eyes wide. Aizawa didn't even turn around. If you're going to be a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events, he said. UA's selling point is how unrestricted its school traditions are. This is also how your teachers will run their classes. Everyone shifted, murmuring a bit, but they didn't interrupt him. You guys have been doing these since junior high, haven't you? He said. Physical fitness tests where you weren't allowed to use your quirks. This country still uses the averages taken from students not using their quirks. It's not rational. That's just the Ministry of Education procrastinating. Aizawa turned to Bakugo and Michi. Bakugo, you and Hamasaki tied for first in the practical exam, right? The rest of the class turned toward them with wide eyes. Luckily for Michi, Aizawa chose Bakugo for his demonstration. He probably would have had to make up some answers. Bakugo, what was your record in the softball throwback in junior high? 67 meters, he said, a bit of a frown on his face. Try doing it with your quirk, Aizawa suggested, handing him his softball and motioning towards a white circle in the ground. You can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. Hurry up, and give it all you've got. Bakugo nodded and began stretching. Alright, then, he said. He prepped himself for the throw, rearing back and whipping the ball impressively fast, and that was before he added a blast to the pitch. Die. He screamed as his explosion rocketed the ball forward. Die? Michi said, a small grin on his face. That's a little intense. A couple of classmates snickered, but Bakugo ignored them, staring as the ball became a tiny speck that finally started to fall down again. When it hit the ground, Aizawa turned around and showed the screen of his little device. 705.2 meters. The class gasped in awe, other than Michi. He was expecting something like that from Koch-chan. Hopefully he didn't get called up next. With his mostly non-physical quirks, it would be pretty underwhelming. He decided to say that regenerate was his quirk, considering it was by far the most noticeable. He could blame it for his energy absorption to an extent. Resilience could fall under the umbrella as well, and his two mental quirks weren't outwardly noticeable. Know your own maximum first, Aizawa said. That is the most rational way to form the foundations of a hero. Ooh, this looks fun, Mina said, clapping her hands. We can use our quirks as much as we want. The thin guy with the big circles on his elbows agreed. As expected from the hero course. It looks fun, huh? Aizawa said, and Michi winced. You have 3 years to become a hero. Are you going to have that attitude the whole time? The teacher smiled, and it was most certainly not a nice smile. Alright. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential and will be punished with expulsion. You just had to say something, didn't you, Mina? Michi snarked good-naturedly. Hey, I didn't know he. Wait a minute, how do you know my name? We haven't met, have we? Michi just smiled while his mind went into panic mode. Mayday, mayday, absolute dumbus alert. Mayday. He cursed himself for his carelessness. Sorry, that was probably kind of creepy, he said out loud. I saw it on the seating arrangement, and I heard it on the news a while ago. She winced, nodding. Right. I keep forgetting I was on TV. As teachers, we are free to judge our students as we please, Aizawa continued. His smile became slightly maniacal. Welcome to the UA Hero course. Last place will be expelled. Ichako spoke up, looking worried. But it's the first day of school. Even if it wasn't the first day of school, this is unfair. Natural disasters, horrific accidents, and selfish villains, Aizawa said in response. Calamities whose time and place can't be predicted. The world is filled with unfairness. Heroes are the ones that help resolve those situations. If you wanted to go hang out with your friends at Mickey D's after school, you came to the wrong place. For the next 3 years, UA will do everything it can to prepare you to be heroes, and that means giving you one hardship after another. Go beyond. Plus ultra. He beckoned with a challenging gesture, still smiling. Overcome it with everything you've got. The students all nodded, their features hardening as they set themselves to the challenge at hand. Alright, demonstration's over, the teacher said. The real thing starts now. First was the 50-meter dash. Michi watched the students go, wondering exactly how their placement would be calculated. Would it just be an average of their placement? If so, Michi had nothing to worry about. He may only have a vague memory of pain over the last 10 months, but he knew he'd come out of it stronger and faster than anyone he knew without a strength or speed enhancement quirk. It also meant that it didn't matter how much you won by in any event, first place was first place, and it wouldn't make up for bad performance in the other tests. He watched with grudging admiration as Bakugo used his stupid explosions to help with nearly every test. His quirk was ridiculously versatile, and he was incredible at using it. Michi, meanwhile, just competed to the best of his admittedly impressive abilities. Even though resilience and regeneration weren't actually strength-enhancing quirks, they did make it so he could push his body significantly harder without hurting himself. All for one's training more like torture, but it did make him stronger had somehow disabled his body's natural limit to his muscle power, which meant he had the kind of strength that mothers used to lift cars from their children all the time. Not nearly as impressive as an actual strength-enhancing quirk, but it was still impressive enough to put his classmates in awe, especially when he told him his quirk was just regeneration. He did have a plan to draw all eyes to him again, though. After repeated failed attempts at getting Bakugo to shake his hand, the other boy finally, although this wasn't quite as good, slapped Michi's hand away. Michi grinned, just in time. The softball throw was next. He discreetly pulled a small emergency lighter from his backpack and disassembled it, hiding the sparking mechanism in his fist. He got the softball from Aizawa and took his place in the circle, taking a deep breath. His timing would need to be perfect for this to work. He put the ball into his right hand along with the striker from his lighter, the same hand that Bakugo had slapped away earlier. He could still feel the residue of Bakugo's nitroglycerin-infused sweat on his palm. Michi braced himself, then threw as hard as he could, striking the sparking mechanism with his fingers, just as the ball was leaving his fingers. To every onlooker's shock, a blast that looked just like one of Bakugo's launched the ball forward, though the explosion wasn't as powerful as the volatile blonde's. The ball soared through the air while everyone stared, trying to understand what had just happened. Michi hissed in pain and shook out his hand, though the burns healed quickly due to his quirk. The ball finally landed, seeming to break some sort of spell as Aizawa turned and displayed the 532.6 meters on his device. Bro, what was that? The kid with spiky red hair asked, running forward to examine Michi's hands. Michi had learned the kid's name was Ijiro Kirishima, and his quirk was hardening, which was some prime pun fuel. That was Bakugo's quirk, wasn't it? Asked the overly energetic blonde with the lightning design in his hair. His name was Denki Konari, and his quirk was electrification. What the hell did you do, you damn extra? Bakugo's fuming voice said, cutting through the excited chatter of the other classmates. I thought you said your quirk was regeneration, and yet here you are using my explosion. Dude, you're not a likable guy, Michi said. Did you really think I wanted to shake your hand so badly just because I thought you were so cool? Bakugo tensed. You little. I used your sweat from when you slapped away my hand earlier. All I had to do was spark it as I threw. How did you know how my quirk worked? Bakugo said, narrowing his eyes. Michi grinned. I've got to have something to make up for my weak-ass regeneration quirk, don't I? I do my research. He really wished his classmates could appreciate his pun, but that would blow his cover, and he couldn't have that. Bakugo glared at him for a minute, then huffed and stalked away. Michi tried not to show his surprise. The Koch-chan he knew would have attacked him then and there. Maybe he cooled off a bit. In the end, they did 8 total fitness tests, and the kid with the weird balls on his head came in last. Michi himself came in 4th, right behind Bakugo. Momoyo Yorozu came in 1st, and Shoto Todoroki came in 2nd. He didn't really check the rankings after that, other than to see that Minoru Mineta had come in last. By the way, I was lying about the expulsion, Aizawa said offhandedly. Michi couldn't help it. He started laughing at the looks on everyone's faces, especially Mineta's. It was a rational deception to draw out the upper limits of your quirks. As some of the students started freaking out, Momo sighed. Of course it was a lie. It should have been obvious if you just thought it through. A couple of the kids mumbled in embarrassment, and Michi shook his head. It wasn't a lie, there was just no one pathetic enough for Aizawa to expel. He'd heard the stories of the man. Last year, he'd expelled an entire class. Well, that was nerve-wracking, said the boy with the weird elbows. Michi had learned over the course of the test that his name was Hantasero, and his quirk was tape. He could shoot tape out of his elbows. It sounded pretty dumb, but the tape was ridiculously strong, and he had a lot of control over it. I'll take up that challenge anytime, Kirishima said with a grin. With that, we're done here, Aizawa said. There are handouts with the curriculum and such in the classroom, so look over them when you get back. He started walking away, but he paused right before he went out of sight. Oh, and prepare yourselves. Tomorrow we'll have much more rigorous tests. The class hesitated for a moment before slowly migrating back to the classroom and grabbing the handouts Mr. Aizawa had mentioned. Michi found he enjoyed the company of most of the students in the class, even Bakugo, for sentimental reasons, not for his personality. Kirishima's enthusiasm had a way of inspiring the people around him, and talking to him helped even Michi's ridiculously heavy burdens feel lighter. It was just so much easier to be optimistic about life with Kirishima around. Konari was hilarious, and his humor had just the right amount of stupid that it sometimes worried his fellow classmates, which just made Michi laugh harder. It had been a long time since he'd laughed. He saw Konari keep sneaking glances over at the earphone jack girl, Jiro, and he grinned. Time to be a bro. Jiro and Mina were talking together with the frog girl, Tsuyu, and the invisible girl, Toru. He ran over with a wave and a grin, motioning for Konari and Kirishima to follow. Hey, we haven't really met officially, he said, introducing himself. I'm Michi Hamasaki. What are your names? He nodded as the girls introduced themselves, even though he already knew all of them. He'd already called Mina by name, but she still introduced herself when she saw Konari and Kirishima come up behind him. The two other boys introduced themselves when they arrived, and Michi saw the same confusing interaction between Konari and Jiro. Surprisingly, Kirishima and Mina also seemed to know each other. So, Jiro, he started. Do you and Konari know each other? You keep laughing whenever you look at him. She raised her eyebrows innocently, then immediately ruined the effect when she glanced at Konari and started to laugh again. What's she laughing at, Denki? Michi asked, turning to him. He groaned. If I overuse my electrification quirk, it short-circuits my brain, he finally admitted. We met in the entrance exam, and I went overboard right in front of her. She's laughing because last time she saw me, I was a gibbering mess with no working brain cells. Whoa, dude, that sounds kind of dangerous. Michi paused. But also kind of hilarious, he admitted. I'm pretty good with quirk analysis. We should get together sometime and figure out how to get around it. Now, he knew that was trying to avoid reminding certain classmates of Izuku, but the more he thought about it, the more it seemed like that was the only way to get back at All For One. He was explicitly banned from trying to harm the League in any way, but he had no instructions regarding how he was supposed to behave. All For One had told him to make his appearance unrecognizable from Izuku, but he never said anything about behavior. He definitely wasn't going to act exactly like he used to, though. That would just be humiliating. What about Mina and Kirishima? You guys seem kind of familiar with each other, Michi said, shaking himself out of his thoughts. We went to the same middle school, Mina admitted with a sneaky grin at Kirishima. He blushed faintly. Hold up, you said you're good with quirk analysis. Konari asked, getting his attention back. Have you ever heard of someone's quirk just disappearing? Like, if it just stopped working? Michi, a neutrally curious expression on his face, but his heart dropped to his stomach. I don't think so, he said. Why? What was a quirk? Konari nodded, looking disappointed. My mom had energy absorption, he said. A little less than a year ago, it just stopped working for some reason. Oh, dear. Stomach all the way gone, dropped down to his toes and then passed there to hell. Guilt was there to take his place, even though Michi knew he didn't really have anything to feel guilty about. This was seriously a sick coincidence. I actually have a few ideas for that one, he found himself saying. No. Wrong thing to say, stop you absolute idiot. Looks like his hero complex wasn't completely gone. I'll need to check some things, but I'll keep you updated. Well, shit. How the fuck do you give a quirk back? It's not like he could get all for one to do it, he'd probably kill the poor woman. If he could just pass it on somehow. No way. He found himself glancing toward the school, where All Might most likely was. The power to pass down a quirk. Could it work individually? His quest to get one for all from All Might had somehow progressed to a quest to give Mrs. Konari her quirk back. Did you really tie with Bakugo for first place in the practical exam? Mina asked him, interrupting his thoughts. How did you get so many points? He scratched the back of his neck in a show of embarrassment. I don't really know if I should tell you guys, he said. You probably already think I'm cheap for using Bakugo's quirk to boost my scores in the ball throw today. Are you kidding? Kirishima cried. That was awesome. It's totally amazing how someone with just a healing quirk can be so creative. Thanks, Michi said with a small grin. Alright. Did your exams have the giant robot come out at the end? His 5 classmates nodded, eyes slowly widening in realization. Well, Achako was stuck under some debris that she couldn't quite reach, and it was coming up right on top of her. I ran back and helped her use her quirk to get free, and then I came up with a plan. I asked her to keep the debris weightless for just a bit longer, and while it was weightless, I whirled it around and threw it as hard as I could at the robot's head. Then I had her release it, and the debris hit it so hard the head exploded. Exploded? They exclaimed simultaneously. How did you throw it so hard? Michi frowned. It was just a discus throw, he said. About 50 miles per hour. Not that impressive. How big was the debris? Toru asked. Michi thought about it. I would say about a 2 or 3 ton chunk of cement, he said after a moment. He was aware of their jaws hitting the floor, and he smirked internally. Like I said, it was kind of cheap. Achako did most of the work, and it looked from the video like it was all me. Dude, you're amazing, Denki finally said. Although, now I kind of want to try and throw 3 tons of weightless concrete like a frisbee. Is Achako around? Yuro jabbed him in the ribs with her earphone jack, and even though Denki hunched over it and wheezed, Michi could tell he was ecstatic that they were interacting again. Don't you dare, she warned. You probably bring down a building somehow. Yeah, that would be so cool, Denki agreed before getting jabbed again. The group laughed as they walked, and Michi decided he might as well play the quirk analysis card for all it was worth. Speaking of quirk analysis, Toru, what is your quirk really? What do you mean? She asked in confusion. I'm invisible. It's pretty obvious. Well, yeah, but there are different ways to make yourself invisible. For example, if light just passed through you, you would be blind because it just went through your eyes. Oh, she said, considering. That's a good point. Well, I'm not blind, but I don't know what to tell you. Well, Michi said, grinning excitedly. If light doesn't go through you, that means your quirk bends light around you to hide your body. And when it comes to quirks, getting down to the basics can be very important. So you're saying you think my quirk is more of a light-bending quirk than just an invisibility one? She said, starting to sound excited. What does that mean? Well, it just opens up a lot of possibilities. Take Bakugo's quirk for example. If you just think of it as creating explosions with his hands, that's all it is. If you think about it as igniting his explosive sweat with his hands, though, that opens up things like my using his quirk just from getting a high five from him. Do you think I could ever become visible? Toru asked, a bit wistfully. People complain about feeling like no one sees them all the time. You have no idea how discouraging it can get when people really don't see you. Depending on what we manage to find out, I think you could do a lot more than that, Michi said with a laugh. Of course, you might have some arbitrary regulations that relate directly to invisibility, but as I see it, there's no reason you wouldn't have complete control on how light interacted with you. You could make yourself visible, you could disguise yourself, maybe you could create a super bright light to blind enemies, maybe you could expand your effect to your clothes or even other people. Quirks are crazy things, technicalities usually work. Wow, Toru said in awe after taking a moment to process everything he just said. You've really thought this kind of thing through, haven't you? Yeah, he chuckled. I was always jealous of other quirks. Regeneration doesn't really have many technicalities I can take advantage of, so I got really good at using other people's quirks to my own advantage. What about me? Kirishima asked excitedly. Can you think of anything for hardening? Michi laughed again. I'll have to get back to you tomorrow. All that's coming to mind right now are inappropriate jokes. Kirishima scowled, flushing slightly in embarrassment as everyone laughed. By then, they'd gotten their things and were on their way home. I have to go this way, guys, Michi said, waving goodbye. See you all tomorrow. They parted ways, and Michi walked silently for several moments before a hand landed on his shoulder, getting his attention. He just barely stopped himself from retaliating to the unexpected touch, turning politely to see Tenya eat his intent face. Hey Tenya. How are you? He said. I'm doing well, thank you, he said. I was really surprised by Aizawa-sensei, though. He really impressed me, but I can't believe he would lie to us just to motivate us. He wasn't lying, Michi said with a shrug. Last year, he expelled an entire class. I guess we all just really impressed him. Even Mineta? Tenya asked incredulously. Michi winced. I guess, he said, sounding unconvinced even to himself. They looked at each other for a minute, then shrugged in acceptance and kept walking. Hey, wait, called out a familiar voice from behind them. Ichako was running towards them, her usual bright smile on her face. Are you two headed to the station? We should go together. Ichako, Michi said. Where were you? Everyone was asking how I did so well in the entrance exam, and when I told them, everyone wanted to ask you about your quirk. They all think you're super cool. She froze, her face going bright red, even as her smile stayed fixed on her face. She tripped and almost fell, but Michi and Tenya both ran forward and caught her before she hit the floor. Thanks, she said, still bright red. What did you tell them? I told them what really happened. You did all the work, Michi said, hands on his hips. I'm just giving credit where it's due. How did you do that, actually? Tenya interjected. I thought you just had a crazy strength quirk, but you said today that you only have regeneration. Michi nodded. That's right. Ichako used her quirk to make the cement block weightless so I could throw it, then released it right before it hit. It was amazing. You came up with that plan in the moment, just a few minutes after you saw her quirk for the first time. Tenya asked in awe. That's even more impressive than using your own strength. And Ichako, you were able to execute his plan perfectly, on your first try. You guys are amazing. Ichako, who had started to get her blush under control, was once again the color of a tomato, as she tried desperately to shove more of the credit onto Michi. Michi wasn't having any of it, and he kept bickering with the two all the way to the station. All in all, it was a pretty fantastic first day of school.s. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to me, and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-ifs coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination. Goodbye everyone.